So let me just start. So this is our game. It's called Serpentine. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So the team currently comprises of 6 members. Myself being the director and art lead. Jaira, who's on the call with us. So he's the co-director and programmer. Si Qi is our rigger. We have 2 animators, Bervin and Ying Jian. And last but not least is Sandra Singh, who is our sound designer. Yeah. Okay. So before I go on any further, I just like to mention, I'd like to start with a simple story about a classic Chinese folktale. So Serpentine is an alternate take on the famous Chinese folklore tale of Lady White Snake or Bai Se Zhuan. So Bai Se Zhen is a snake demoness who falls in love with a human male called Xu Xian. They get married, but their happiness is short-lived as they get separated by a monk called Fa Hai. Purely because human-demon relationships were frowned upon amongst the deities, humans and demons, she was cast away and sealed under a pagoda, and her husband was dragged to hell. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the Lifeng Pagoda is where a Lady White Snake is rumored to be sealed underneath, where today stands a reconstructed version. So for the first level, we wanted to explore the depths of the temple, and this is the idea we came up with. So while she's in imprisonment underneath this pagoda, this is where our story integrates 1,000 years after her imprisonment. Okay, next slide. So now we will present to you our trailer.
Yep, so unfortunately, our trailer, we don't have audio for now because our composer actually composed a track for it. But I'll just be a bit narrating through some of the aspects of it. So here are some of the scenes that you might see in our game. For example, some of the Jade Emperor and his soldiers, and also some of the demon monsters like a horse-headed and bull-headed demon. There's other places as well. So yeah, there are some scenes placed around like some of the gameplay in our first level. And some other enemies you might encounter. So currently, our game is kind of still in development. But yeah, we hope you can follow along on our development process. Yeah, back to you, Mark.
Okay. So next slide. Okay. So I hope maybe you enjoyed the visuals. Okay. So what exactly is Serpentine? Serpentine is a third-person hack-and-slash fantasy set in China, where we follow Bai Su Zhen in her quest to find her husband in the midst of a violent war. So for now, we are aiming for PC audience, and eventually, if we can, we would like to look at the console market as well. So Serpentine is aimed to be a 20-minute demo in the short run. In the long run, we want this game to have about 12 hours playtime. So how the player progresses is by having encounter-to-encounter progression. Progress is made by going through the main story or side quests. In the game, Bai Su Zhen's goal is to find her missing husband, who was dragged into hell, and she must complete quests, fight demons, fight adversaries from the war, and meet new friends. Next slide. So here are some of our game inspirations. Yeah. First one being Black Myth Wukong, a game developed by Game Science. It's probably the closest game we can consider in similar in terms of theme, gameplay genre, and aesthetics. Another game we like to infer from is God of War, a game from Santa Monica Studios. It's also an inspiration for us in terms of gameplay structure, game mechanics, and player progression. I'd like to say that we are not a big studio. We are just a couple of students, but we draw plenty of inspiration from these 2 games. So we are also leveraging on a strong storyline based on Chinese lore and combining elements from combat and player progression from these 2 games as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here are some screenshots from our level design. So for the first level, as mentioned, it is held underneath the pagoda. We wanted to capture the Eastern elements and traditional roots, but also want to inject and explore our own version of fictional mythological wonder. For me, as a 3D modeler and art lead, creating these levels and sculpting up the models was an interesting task, and it was really fun. To retain somewhat a correct depiction in Chinese history and still have a unique spin on its aesthetics. Hence, many of our concepts draw inspiration from Chinese mythology, like the zodiac race, the story of Lady White Snake herself, and many other interconnecting deities and characters, all fused together in this interesting new world. Okay, so the next slide. So this is just a little short, a small snippet of what our level design is like currently. It's not too complex right now, but what you can see is the Jade Emperor who is lording over Paisa's imprisonment in the early moments of the game. So she will be released from this prison and we also plan to have motion capture cutscenes in order to act this scene out. Okay, next slide. So from another angle of the same level, we have like the exit scene. So from this level, from this screenshot, we have the demon talismans up. So this place is supposed to keep her in and refrain her from getting out. Yeah, this is not a positive place. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, so this is another level that we are currently developing on. Like this is the next immediate level. So Jaira and myself came up with a few sketches to see what's the best way to curate the story and introduce newer gameplay mechanics to the player as well. Okay, next. So these images are just some images of other levels that we are planning and hoping to develop in the meantime. Yeah, so they draw a lot of inspiration from the Eastern culture, as you can see. Okay, so here are some cutscene sketches. Yeah, just give you a time to look at them. Yeah, this is another one we are doing right now. Okay, next. Okay, so here are some animation inspirations. So we applied key concepts in our first cuts of animation for Paisa to be fluid, graceful, and explosive, taking into account her lithe body and more graceful fighting style. Her dodge dash is a snake-like fluid movement, and her tornado kicks lend inspiration from Chinese Kung Fu and other contemporary fighting styles. So her final magic attack demonstrates her magic power. You will see it later. Now I'll be passing on my time to Jaira, who will be talking more about the narrative development. Okay, Jaira, handing over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So, being rooted in Chinese mythology, we kind of plan to integrate various deities and folklores as well as Chinese history into our game, right? So, ranging from on the left, we have like the famous Jade Emperor and his subjects, as well as a bit more fantasy elements, like the horse-headed demon you saw in the trailer, right? We want our but that being said, we also want our narrative to be enjoyable to all players, regardless of how familiar they might be to these Chinese myths. So in terms of gameplay design, I think this is one of the most one of the games that we've looked at and also looked up to. We are basing our second gameplay combat of God of War. We want like this kind of fast-paced combat with some variety thrown in terms of what powers you have, like different weapons, different attacks, and as well as magic. So as such, we're kind of modeling our gameplay of that with like the off the shoulder and explosive gameplay. Right. On top of that, we also want to show you, like as Mark has shown you previously, some incorporation of martial art elements and Eastern influences. So here are some of the gifs of some animation first takes that we have created, just to give our game a bit more of a unique feel in terms of how our character plays out. Right. So for example, Paisa herself will have both sword attacks as well as melee attacks. Right, so actually to demonstrate this, I'm actually going to show you an example in our engine. So here is our first level, like you saw in the trailer, right? So this is Paisa herself. So she has firstly her sword combo, right? Very simple stuff. And take note that we actually also have a rigged sword that's animating as well. So that's one special thing that we added. On top of that, we also have unarmed attacks as well. So like more traditional, maybe like palm thrusts, and then these are the magic attacks, right, that we also have incorporated into our game. Right, so let me go back to the presentation. Give me a second. Yep. So on top of that, we also have other elements. Like for example, while we are still conceptualizing some of our enemies, we have to stay true to our narrative. So like we mentioned earlier, some of the wartime elements like tanks, as well as some of the demonic Chinese mythology elements, such as this crow demon hybrid. We have to bring both of these elements into a game to create a realistic and immersive world. Right, so these characters also have unique attack patterns, and we hope that the combat that we bring will be diverse and interesting throughout the game. Right, now I'll pass my time on to Shiqi, our rigger, to talk about more of the interesting animation highlights of our game.
Thank you, Jaira. To achieve the fluidness of Baisha's animation, there is a heavy consideration on the rigging portion of Baisha's body. I had to communicate a lot with the animators on what they needed along with Gyra on how to allow Baisha to achieve her snake-like animations. Because we are using Unreal Engine's closed simulation to complement the fluidness of her animations, I rigged parts of her body, and for other parts, I let the game engine do its job. Next slide. Okay. Yeah. To add on, we wanted to highlight the essence of her snake-like sword, which can be converted into a whip. We referenced the weapon from Raya to create a snake-like sword, as can see from this GIF. Next slide. To achieve the snake-like sword and whip, it had to be treated like a snake or rope. However, unlike snake rigs, I also need to make sure the sword is extendable and each blade sector is evenly extended for our animators to animate easily. I also need to consider the extension of the string inside the blade. I experimented with different approaches and finally achieved the effect we want by using parenting and skinning concepts in Maya. Next slide. The effect we get here is that we have both an animated rig and sword, allowing Baisha to perform more powerful combo attacks. While this is the first pass for our sword attacks, I think that there's a lot of potential for flasher animations here. I will pass my time back to Jaira to wrap up our presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shuzi. So this is our present timeline. This might be a bit surprising, but we only started in May of this year, so we've only done for almost been working on this game for about 3 months. We're in the midst of creating our base gameplay, right? So at around August, we are trying to get our base gameplay up, and then we'll start on cutscene motion capture, right? From there, by January 2022, then we plan to have some of the most of the cutscenes fully filmed and the combat scenarios done, and then we will work on polishing the gameplay and preparing for April 2022 launch, right? Where in total, this will be the 20-minute demo with 4 combat encounters, including 1 boss fight, as well as the 3 cutscenes in order to tie our narrative together. Right, so I'd like to mention that while this is part of a portion of the game, from there we want to look into expanding the team before confirming a final release date of what the full game will look like, and also to assess how our demo looks like. With that, I actually come to the end of our presentation. I'll be opening the floor to questions, and if you're interested, these are all of our individual members' portfolios, right? If you're interested. Yeah, thank you.
Hi guys, thank you so much for the presentation. We do have some questions, so hold on, give me a moment. So somebody would like to know more about like how did y'all come together, even though you are from different majors, to work on this game together?
Yeah, so maybe myself and Mark can answer that. So Mark and I are actually secondary school friends. But we came together at NTU, and I've always been following along on his like game development and 3D development path. So like and in his final year, he kind of reached out to everybody to ask like, hey, who's a programmer that's also interested in games? And then I kind of hopped off from there based on our connection, and then like it just naturally followed from there. Yeah.
Actually, so what was funny was that I was scratching my head. I was thinking like, crap, where am I going to get my programmer? And then Jaira kind of like reached out at the same time, so we kind of like touched hands. At the same moment, I was like, hey, you wanna join my project? I was like, yeah, I was actually about to like text you. Then okay, I got my guy. I got my programmer. So it just spun off from there. Yeah. And then
yeah,
we
as for the other members, they're all from ADM. So actually, I think Mark is the one that knew most of them in his level or his juniors, and that's all how we all came together. Yeah.
I see. Okay, so there's a follow up to that. Like for the full game release, right? Are y'all going to be working on it full time after graduation? If so, what kind of support are y'all looking at?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I believe our game scope is definitely quite big, especially for students. But I think for Mark and I, right, it's important that we kind of dream big and then we scope from there, right? So in terms of funding, right, what we are looking for is we're gonna develop this 20-minute demo on our own for now, and then assess along the way, as well as at the end of the 20-minute demo, how feasible is it for us to both either take this on full time, or find investors or find publishers to go further, and whether or not we need to hire more to flesh out the entire scope. So that's why the 20-minute demo is important for us to ensure that we have a vertical slice and all of the base systems there to make sure that we are confident in moving forward from there. Yeah. Mark, you have anything to add?
No, I think you wrapped that question quite well.
Yeah.
All right. The language of the game, what would it be in? Would it be English or Chinese?
So primarily now we're looking for it to be English, although the entire team is Chinese. I think that in terms of resource and logistics now, we can only look at English release, but we will definitely want to make it to have a Chinese dub, or make it primarily Chinese, then have an English subtitle along with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So like just to add to that, I think we are trying to appeal to both the English audience that hasn't really seen much of Chinese gameplay, and also the primarily Chinese audience who is more familiar with the mythology or whatever we show in the game. So on that note, yes, we have considered localizing in multiple languages. Yeah.
Okay, give me a moment. Okay, so other than the two games that you guys mentioned for inspiration, right? Are there any other like elements, for example, like Chinese games or even Chinese shows that y'all reference specifically for your game?
Oh yes, Journey to the West, one of them.
Classic.
The Three Kingdoms. Yeah, I took a lot of inspiration from the aesthetics. And there's quite a number of Chinese animation remakes right now. Nerza Reborn is one of them. So I was looking at how they churned it into a steampunk looking, modern looking feel to it. So yeah, that was we took a lot of inspiration from movies, games, sometimes even just portraits of how they drew olden tapestries and stuff like that. Yeah, that was an interesting. Interesting
research.
Yeah, for the
Research
research,
going
yeah.
into it. All right. So the game is hack and slash. So is there any plans to have some terrain advantages or puzzles in the level design?
Yeah, so on that note, I think we are still fleshing out our level design. In fact, like currently just the base gameplay is completed. So puzzles and not, we are still looking at some avenues of what will be interesting in a Chinese context, or in this context of our game, right? So I can't really answer to that as of now, but I think it's a good thing that we are definitely looking at. But I don't have a definite answer for you. Yeah.
Okay, so basically like it's in the planning lah. You guys
Yeah,
haven't
correct.
decided yet. All right. So with the current pandemic, right, how do you guys like collaborate in terms of task tracking, communications? Like what are some of the tools that you use?
Yeah, good question. So actually, if I can share a bit more, so we actually have multiple tools that we use. We have a Trello board for our tasks, right? So these are all the tasks around the team. On top of that, actually, we use this very interesting tool called gather.town. So actually, it's basically a virtual co-working space, and I honestly highly suggest this for like small teams, because you can actually just move around, and your voice is actually transmitted based on how close you are to someone else's avatar. So I think it very very closely mimics
Real life
the working environment. Yeah.
simulation.
So we really like this tool. Like we've been using it a lot, and I think it really works for us. Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
Saturday we will gather the whole team to sit around the table. Then we will play games first, or we play games after our meetings. Then we will go about our daily life. But yeah, that place has become our home during this pandemic. Yeah.
A virtual home to have all of you.
Once we see that brown color like pixelated stuff, okay, it's time for the meeting. Yeah, it's quite fun.
All right. So we have a question. So what would you say is the unique hook of the game compared to other like possible similar games?
Okay, so I wouldn't say there's one hook. I would say that there are a few. Just like, okay, maybe let's take Hades for example. So Hades has a really interesting story. I feel that it has like it's never ending until you like. I've played it many times already. It has a very fast-paced combat that is very addictive, and a progression system that is really fun as well. So for us, I think right now, maybe if I would just answer straight to the question, the most unique hope right now would be the unique take on Chinese aesthetics. Yeah, if that answers your question. We are looking at making the gameplay to be more polished and to make it as addictive as looking as on the same level as looking at all these Chinese visuals. Hope that answers your question.
Okay. I'll wait for the person to respond. But okay, so we have a question like, will you delve more into like the Eastern concept of like 内气? And if so, right, do you have any plans on how you'll be representing this concept in English? Because
Yeah, so
yeah.
thanks. Yeah, I saw I think Jared answered this on the Discord channel. Yeah, so yeah, I think good question. In terms of like how these concepts or these things that exist clearly in the Chinese context. Like maybe one other example I can think of is maybe like filial piety is quite an Asian context. So I think one advantage we have is that for games, right, we can craft gameplay around that and either shift our narrative, shift our story, shift the puzzles, or even shift our character design to reflect that, right? So for example, like that is, I think, one good thing that we can use. So because ours is an interactive element, right? I don't think I have a concrete answer as to or how do I embody this concept, but I think it is a advantage that we can take into building an experience that allows both a Western audience and an Eastern audience to experience interesting like Asian concept like 内气. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
basically like planning around and like basically changing the narrative to fit the concept.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Yep, the previous question, the person said yes, it answers your question. All right. Okay, so maybe let's just hold on a moment. I'm just taking a look at it. Okay, so we have a question from YouTube side. Have you considered expanding the world of Serpentine to include many other characters and deities?
Yeah,
Yes.
Mark, you wanna answer this?
Yeah, that was like from the start. Definitely, 100%. So I think in the trailer, Jared, you can just show. So you see the Jade Emperor as one of like.
Yeah, like this one.
Yeah, some actually one more screenshot I think of
The G Emperor one, is it?
and Guan Yi,
Hang on.
the Chinese God of War. Okay, but
Okay.
basically, yeah, there are more characters that we plan to put inside. That if you can see some of the yeah, like you can see the Court of Hell. So this is the opposite of the Jade Emperor. Yeah, so I guess that's a little teaser for how big this world is gonna get. Yeah.
Right, and another a bit of a teaser is that Baiser is only one of the 12 zodiac animals
Yeah.
in the zodiac mythology, right? So I think we're definitely exploring more ways of integrating these characters, very very iconic characters, into our game. And I hope you'll be excited to see more. Right.
All right. Yes, I know I'm excited. I really like it a lot. Okay, so I think we are done with the questions. So thank you all so much for sharing more about
Thank
Serpentine
you.
and the whole story lore. And yeah, we're excited to see what you guys have up next.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
With
Thank
that,
you.
thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.